Have you ever imagined that a simple bark at 3 a.m. could be the difference between an entire family and tragedy? It was 3 a.m. when an insistent bark turned an ordinary dawn into the only evidence that would save a family. Think about it. The silent street, the house plunged into darkness, and a repeated sound cutting through the air like an alarm no one else heard at first. What you're about to discover may surprise you, because this isn't just another story about dogs saving lives. It's a story about instinct, vigilance, and the invisible role a four-legged hero can play in the home security of ordinary people. Stay with me until the end, because I'll show you how a dog, with nothing but its bark and its presence, created the evidence that would change everything. And for a moment, think with me. Could your own pet one day be the difference between fear and help? On this particular night, the bark wasn't an isolated sound. It was a repeated signal, different from the usual, an urgent alert that woke the family in the darkness, their hearts racing and their eyes full of questions. The living room chair still creaked, the clock ticked away. Hours that only served to confuse the mind, and outside, footsteps seemed to be calculating time, waiting for the right opportunity. The dog, that silent guardian, didn't rest until someone answered the call. Have you ever been there? Ever felt the weight of a night interrupted by something that seemed small but carried enormous risk? It's precisely this feeling we'll relive in detail. The held breath, the lump in the throat, the decision between ignoring or acting. Throughout this video, we'll explore not only what happened in that house, but also why that dog's behavior was so decisive, how canine instinct, combined with a routine of attention and perhaps some training, can become concrete evidence at a critical moment. We'll talk about evidence, audio recordings, camera footage, and testimonies from neighbors who, when combined with the barking, created a clear picture that led to intervention and prevented a kidnapping. And what's more, we'll understand how seemingly small signs, a louder bark, a fixed gaze out the window, an unusual position in the yard, can signal dangers that we humans often ignore. I want you to feel the tension of that early morning, recognize the urgency, and above all, realize the responsibility that comes with having a furry friend at home. In this story, there's fear, there's courage, there's the fragility of an ordinary family, and the unexpected strength of an animal that doesn't measure risks to protect its loved ones. Stay with me, because besides reliving the minutes that almost turned into tragedy, I'll show you what happened next, how the community reacted, how the police used that bark as evidence, and most importantly, what this experience taught us all about prevention, attention, and the incredible ability of dogs to sense danger before it fully manifests. Before I tell you everything, I need to explain who the people were and how the night began. The family that night was simple: mother, father, and a small daughter sleeping in the next room, and a dog who was always alert, as if he knew his role went far beyond companionship. I'll tell you details about each of them, and how small choices in that nighttime routine made all the difference. But before we continue, I want to invite you to join this conversation. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you most so far, or if your pet has ever warned you of something strange. Sharing these stories helps others recognize signs and can even save lives. And if you're enjoying this narrative, give it a like. It's a simple gesture that shows that real stories of courage deserve to be heard, and helps this channel reach more families who need to know how to act in critical situations. Also, subscribe if you want to continue seeing moving stories about dogs who save lives. Your subscription fuels us to produce more honest, responsible, and empathetic content. It's not just vanity. When you comment, like, and subscribe, the community grows, more testimonies reach us, and more people learn to protect their loved ones. Feel free to leave your dog's name, their reaction, or even a question about home security in the comments. I'll read everything and, when possible, provide answers and similar stories that help us better understand these signs. And now, returning to that night, I need to explain exactly how the barking started and why, in just a few minutes, everything changed. That family's home seemed ordinary, one of those houses where the walls hold small, silent stories, where the fan spins slowly and the living room clock reads 2:50, while the street outside sleeps under the yellow glow of a distant streetlight. It was a mother, a father, and their young daughter dreaming in the next room, a simple routine that for them represented comfort and stability. But night has a way of revealing hidden truths and testing decisions that during the day seem banal. The vulnerability of this house lay in the details that go unnoticed. The back window ajar because of the heat, the garage door that didn't lock properly, the profound silence of the neighborhood where neighbors rely more on habit than prevention. When most people develop a security mindset simply out of habit, small breaches become risks, and that's where the role of the animal that lives with us every day comes in. That family's dog wasn't a trained movie hero. He was a faithful companion, with a routine too, sleeping at the foot of the bed, prowling the living room before dawn, and always, on weekends, waiting for extra affection in the morning. But that night his behavior changed. Instead of a soft snore, there was a bark that didn't just cut through the silence, it pierced it like a blade with intent. The sound was different. It wasn't a playful bark, nor a boredom bark. It was an insistent, short, rhythmic bark, as if each sound carried an urgent question to the darkness. The first human reaction was confusion. Is it just a cat? Followed by a look between the couple. That silent question that every decision brings. Is it worth getting up now? Checking the yard and risking going out alone in the dark? Or going back to sleep and ignoring a possible sign? This choice, which might seem small, had a huge impact on the journey of transformation the family would experience that night. Deep down, every home has its own behind-the-scenes story, habits, decisions, fears, and it's precisely in these behind-the-scenes stories that a seemingly simple gesture can change destinies. Dad got up. Mom stayed close, her chest tight. The daughter didn't even notice. Opening the door, the fresh air brought more than the smell of dawn. It brought the sound of nearby footsteps, a calculated movement that seemed to count on no one waking up any time soon. The scene could easily have turned into tragedy, but the barking had created something that, for many, is invisible until it's too late: auditory evidence. An emotional record that would later be recounted, compared and used to connect the dots. Think of the impact, the transformation in a family's perception of security after a single night. The shift in mindset that causes neighbors to pay more attention to their own yards. The subsequent decisions, like installing cameras, reinforcing locks, and listening carefully for any changes in the pet's behavior. There was no hero without context. There was a routine that allowed the dog to perceive the anomaly. There was someone willing to listen, and there was a set of circumstances that, aligned, gave the bark the force of proof. And when I speak of proof, I don't just mean a recorded audio. I mean the narrative that forms later, the behind-the-scenes conversations with the police, the testimonies of those who heard the noise outside, the camera footage that, when synchronized with the bark, went from a nighttime noise to tangible evidence. This raises a question of revelations. How often did something that seemed insignificant hold a hidden truth that only came to light because someone decided to act? This family's journey wasn't just one of fear, it was one of learning and adaptation. Transformation happens when small decisions accumulate impact. The choice to pay attention, to not minimize the animal's instinct, to record the moment. And there's also a profoundly human aspect to all of this. The value of empathy and solidarity from the neighborhood when the news circulated. People who might not even have exchanged a good morning before now see it as a reminder that collective safety requires vigilance and mutual support. In practical terms, what interests us is not just the fact of the barking, but the lessons it offers: how to cultivate a preventative mindset, how to organize routines that reduce vulnerabilities, and how to recognize that, often, the truth we need is hidden in the smallest signals our pets emit. There's a whole technical side too. Small adjustments to doors and windows, simple audio recording systems that capture more than we think, and basic protocols that reduce a family's risk. But these solutions only work if there's a conscious decision to implement them. History then serves as a mirror that reflects our own responsibility. We can learn from it, we can transform habits, and in doing so, impact lives. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic and understand exactly which dog behaviors betray the presence of danger, what differentiates an alert bark from a regular bark, how canine perception operates behind the scenes in our daily lives, and why, in terms of prevention, paying attention to these signals can be the difference between a scare and a disaster, because there are elements in body language and sound that aren't always obvious to us humans, but which, when interpreted correctly, reveal a lot about the intentions of whoever is prowling a house. Comment: that makes sense to me. The room was silent when the first bark cut through the air, dry, almost like a thud of sound that made the father's heart race before he even understood what was happening. It was a different bark, shorter, more urgent, repeated at such precise intervals that they seemed to dictate the rhythm of that early morning. The dog stood in the doorway, body tense, fur bristling, as if confronted by a hidden truth only he could see. The fan continued to whirl inward, indifferent, but the world was no longer the same. The mother looked up from the bed and felt a shiver run down her spine, the kind of shiver that seems to warn that a decision must be made immediately. They stared at each other in silence, and for a few seconds there was an internal battle between fear and the need to act. Those barks weren't whimsical. They carried an emotional weight, a call that carried an impact impossible to ignore. The father stood slowly, his feet touching the cold floor, while the dog took a step back and started barking again, louder, as if to speed up the process. Each sound seemed to echo throughout the house, awakening memories of other nights when the dog had warned of minor things, a cat on the roof, a door slamming. But something about this night was on another level. The air was heavy, the feeling that there was someone outside, someone who shouldn't be there. When the father turned on the living room light, the reflection spread through the half-open window, and the dog ran to it, scratching the wood with his paws, as if to say, "Look here now." The noise was enough to shatter the last shred of doubt. He unlocked the door carefully, taking a deep breath, the metallic sound of the lock seeming too loud in the dense silence. As he turned the handle, the cold dawn wind blew in through the crack, bringing with it the distinct sound of hurried footsteps, as if someone had just retreated. It was at that moment that his heart raced, because there was no mistaking it. They weren't animal footsteps, they weren't branches snapping by chance, they were human footsteps. The dog barked louder, took 2 steps forward and then stopped, alert, as if waiting for a command. Tension gripped his entire body. His mother, now standing behind him, held her cell phone with trembling hands, wondering if she should call someone. But before she could decide, the dog darted across the yard and positioned itself near the gate. Each bark reverberated like a growing alert, drawing the attention of anyone nearby. Suddenly, a shadow moved quickly beyond the fence, and for an instant they could see the figure of a person retreating. His mother called the nearest neighbor, and the voice on the other end confirmed that it had also heard something strange minutes earlier. It was as if each piece of the puzzle was falling into place in real time, revealing the danger lurking nearby. The father, his adrenaline pumping, decided to call the police and describe the situation. Meanwhile, the dog didn't stop. He alternated between looking at his owner and staring at the gate, his body poised for reaction. That's when metallic noises were heard outside, as if something had fallen. Later, this detail would be crucial in identifying the suspect's escape route. But at that moment, it only served to reinforce the certainty that something serious was afoot. The neighborhood began to stir, lights flickering on, and tension spread to the street. There was no longer any doubt that this was no false threat. Something had tried to happen in that house. This escalation of tension changed everything. Those minutes seemed eternal, every sound amplified, every movement of the dog acting as a radar, anticipating the next step. It's interesting to realize how, in moments like these, the human mind enters a state of hyper-attention. Every detail matters, every decision can have a lasting impact. The father began mentally recording what he saw, thinking he might need to recount every second to the authorities. It felt like being behind the scenes of a movie, but with the difference that the outcome was still open and every choice could change the outcome. When they finally heard the distant sound of an approaching siren, their feelings were one of relief mixed with fear. Relief knowing help was coming, fear at the thought of what they might find outside. The dog stopped barking for a moment, as if sensing something was about to change, and simply growled softly, his body still on high alert. It was as if he were handing over responsibility to his owner and the authorities, but without letting his guard down. And it was at that very moment that the father decided to go out into the yard and check. The flashlight illuminated the dirt floor, revealing fresh footprints and a fallen object near the fence. Something that would later become essential evidence in understanding the attempted break-in. What they found outside became evidence and changed everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject and show how these signs transformed into a clear narrative for the police, how the dog's behavior was crucial to the investigation, and what revelations emerged after that tense morning. Because every detail of that night still resonates as a warning about safety, attention, and courage. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject and accurately describe the moment when tension transformed into concrete action. When the early morning ceased to be merely a backdrop and became a scene filled with evidence, voices of authority, and decisions that changed the course of that family's life. The siren arriving in the distance brought with it not only flashing lights on the street, but also a presence that restored a modicum of order to the emotional chaos that had ensued. After the father's call, the police officers appeared with firm steps, flashlights that cut through the darkness, and a posture that calmed those at home. But the feeling of vulnerability remained, because trust and foresight are built over time. The officers, already trained to read clues, began working behind the scenes that morning. They synchronized the time of the call with the presence records, asked to see footage from the few cameras on the street, noted the sequence of barking reported by residents, and cross-referenced everything with the footprints and the object left near the fence. It was there, in that intersection of information, that the hidden truth began to methodically reveal itself. The barking, previously just a beep in the dark, became a key piece of a narrative that pointed to an attempted kidnapping. What the neighbors later recounted, in a firm and sometimes emotional tone, served as a complement. I heard a strange noise. I saw a shadow move away. And when these testimonies were aligned with the audio recording and public security footage, a chain of evidence was formed that transformed suspicion into a concrete investigation. It's important to emphasize that nothing there was built on vague assumptions. There was cross-referencing of data, professional decisions, and police work that respected the process and avoided sensationalism. The impact of this intervention was twofold. First, it prevented a crime that could have evolved in unpredictable ways. Second, it left a transformative mark on the mindset of that community, which now viewed security through a different lens, less tolerant of carelessness and more proactive in everyday decisions. In recounting this, I cannot help but mention how the investigation considered the dog's behavior as both a technical and emotional element. In practice, the police requested that the audio of the barking be attached to the report, requested forensic analysis of the object found, and collected statements to compile a report that would later be used for legal proceedings and to reinforce preventive measures in the neighborhood. For the family, the feeling was one of validation. The animal's instincts had been taken seriously, and with this, it was proven that small actions, an insistent bark, A protective position at the gate can have a real and measurable impact. For the public authorities, it was a demonstration of how collaboration between citizens and police, when guided by sound decisions and clear communication, can produce quick and reliable results. The revelations that emerged in the following hours were interesting because they revealed a network of intentions behind the act, already calculated escape routes, attempts to manipulate the scene to appear casual, and the search for windows of opportunity at vulnerable times. None of this justifies the attempt, but it helps us understand how criminals think and why simple prevention measures, adequate lighting, reinforced locks, audio and visual recording play a decisive role. The journey to resolve this situation also brought human lessons. Neighbors who were previously distant came closer to comfort the family, shared vigilance, and organized themselves to create shifts of care. The couple underwent a short but intense process of psychological transformation, dealing with guilt over minor negligence and gratitude for having survived the risk. There is a lasting emotional impact that we cannot ignore. Disturbed nights of sleep, the need for support, conversations with specialists about trauma and protection, and this shows that safety goes beyond equipment. It involves internal decisions, a mindset of care, and the courage to act when something seems out of place. In practical terms, the police recommended specific measures that, taken together, function as a prevention contract, checking locks, installing simple sensors, maintaining direct communication with neighbors, and reporting any incident, no matter how minor. These are decisions that represent a possible transformation in any family's routine, and, when adopted, drastically reduce the chance of an attempted attack. As the investigation progressed, the behind-the-scenes nature of a discrete operation became clear. Background checks in nearby areas, searches for public cameras that might have captured the movement, and the compilation of a dossier that would later help identify at least the suspect's profile. The process also demonstrated the power of collaborative evidence, audio of the barking, door recordings, and witness accounts, which together formed a picture the police could not ignore. And it was thus, in this alignment of animal instinct, human decision, and institutional action, that the attempt was halted, and with it, a narrative of fear gave way to the possibility of healing and learning. The family, though shaken, began to rebuild their routine with new precautions, and the community began to adopt a more vigilant stance, demonstrating that the impact of a single night can reverberate as a cultural shift across an entire neighborhood. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic and uncover which exact dog signals experts have recognized as legitimate warnings, how to turn these signals into simple prevention protocols, and what practical steps you can implement today in your home so that the next bark isn't just a sound, but the first link in an effective protective network. Comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject and ease, with words and images, the moment when tension gave way to closure, not a definitive end, but a new beginning filled with revelations and decisions that marked that family's journey. Imagine the scene, police car lights flashing in the distance, neighbors on the street peering over walls, and in the midst of it all, the dog that moments before was barking as if asking for help, now being embraced with trembling hands and teary eyes. The camera lingers on the close-up of the snout, the moist eyes, and the labored breathing. Then it moves up to show the group embrace, the mother in her husband's arms, the girl who still doesn't fully understand the danger, and the dog perched on the lap, as if accepting recognition but remaining vigilant. It's an image that conveys transformation and impact. It's not just crime prevention. It's a shift in mindset that takes hold in people, the realization that small, everyday decisions have real weight, that routine holds hidden truths that can be illuminated by a simple gesture, like hearing a bark and deciding to act. Behind the scenes of this scene, the police work calmly, collecting reports, recordings, and evidence. Neighbors come to offer sheets, coffee, or simply their presence. There's a human movement of solidarity that in itself is a lesson in community and shared responsibility. Animal safety and behavior experts emphasize that interpreting signals isn't mysticism. It's a trainable skill, a combination of observation, routine, and decision-making. They point out that the dog's behavior that night, rhythmic barking, tense posture, focusing on specific spots in the yard, are patterns that indicate a real alert, not just discomfort. With this comes the revelation that prevention has layers, physical structure. Yes, locks, lighting, cameras, but also a deep human component, involving mindfulness, quick decision-making, and the courage to transform discomfort into action. When recounting the outcome, we must also discuss the evidence, the audio of the barking that was attached to the report, the object left near the fence that allowed the escape route to be mapped, and the security footage that synchronized with the sound, created a picture that compelled the authorities to act. The hidden truth, which could have remained merely fear, became a document, was analyzed, yielded names, routes, and above all, an understanding of how attempts operate at vulnerable times. This had a direct impact on the family's decisions. They changed the locks, installed sensor-based lighting, and installed a simple camera that records audio, practical actions that cost little compared to the value of security. These decisions, when adopted, produce a concrete transformation in routine, less tense nights, a greater sense of control, and a prevention mindset that spreads throughout the neighborhood, because when one family changes, others observe and end up adopting similar measures. But there's also the emotional aspect, which needs to be handled carefully. The family has experienced a shock that can't be erased by practical measures, sleepless nights, the need to talk about what happened, the recognition that normalcy has been shaken. Psychologists, community conversations, and simple reconnection rituals, family dinners, reinforced nighttime routines, praise for the animal who saved the family, are all part of the rebuilding process. In this process, the dog becomes a symbol of courage and loyalty, deserving more than a hasty thank you. It deserves attention, veterinary care, rewards, and affection that reinforce its healthy role within the family dynamic. Positive training, socialization exercises, and reinforcement of basic commands are sensible recommendations for any owner who wants to enhance their pet's alertness without overwhelming them. Another important revelation came from observing how the community reacted. Neighbors who previously went unnoticed became points of surveillance and support. Messaging groups among residents were activated. Simple passwords were agreed upon for quick warnings. And a spirit of collaboration grew, demonstrating that prevention is largely a collective decision. This social impact has practical consequences: increased attention to street lighting, discussions with local representatives about more attentive patrols, and the dissemination of basic safety information. All of this is the result of simple decisions that combined create a new protective landscape. From a technical standpoint, the lessons are clear and applicable. Record sounds and images whenever possible. Position cameras covering access routes. Keep entry points well lit and locked. Review habits that leave the house exposed. And most importantly, observe any changes in your pet's behavior. Unusual barking, rigid posture, fixation on blind spots in the yard, or a sudden change in routine are signs that call for attention. These measures are not magic solutions, but tools that, combined with the mindset shift I mentioned earlier, create an effective safety net. In terms of personal transformation, what stands out is the ability to transform fear into decision. The family in that house didn't allow themselves to be paralyzed by panic. They chose to act, communicate, and then rebuild. And this journey of recovery has a multiplier effect, because stories like this inspire others to take a closer look at their own past lives. There's also a learning curve about narrative and memory. Telling what happened, detailing the signs, explaining the measures taken, all of this helps consolidate collective knowledge. When testimonies are shared honestly, They reveal patterns that others can recognize before it's too late. So value stories, record them when safe, and offer support to those who have experienced similar situations. Emotionally, celebrating the four-legged hero is a gesture that strengthens bonds and humanizes protection. Materially, investing in simple measures is a decision that translates prevention into practice. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic and show you, step by step, how to interpret your dog's signals. Put together a realistic emergency plan and apply accessible technical solutions that can transform your home security without requiring major renovations. Comment below, this makes sense to me, if you've made it this far. Thank you for walking with me through this night of tension and courage. It already says a lot about how much you value real stories and practical solutions. If this content was helpful to you and you want to see more stories that blend emotion, transformation, and tips that can protect your loved ones, subscribe to the channel. Here I bring real stories, simple analyses, and practical steps to apply in your routine. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like. It's a silent way of recognizing the four-legged hero and helping this type of content reach those who need it. And if you want to leave a sign that you stuck with me until the end, write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end," or "This message was for me." I'll read and respond whenever possible. There's a video here that complements this topic with practical steps for putting together an emergency plan at home. Click and stay with me there. The journey continues, and there's much more for us to learn together.